everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come range, giant, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Balthazar.
And welcome to this week's weekly recap, where we just have two commits to cover, and then it's going to be another vibes-based episode. Hopefully it doesn't devolve as quickly as the Landmarks episode, where it ended up with the Sphinx on top of Bramlage Coliseum. But before we get into the new commits, we do want to thank the sponsors of this show, and that is Greg Arthur and Grandma.
Thank you, Grandma.
Thank you, Grandma. And if you want to have your name read out at the beginning of every single show, please be sure to check out the official supporters link of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, both in our podcast and Twitter bios. But let's dive straight in to the first commit of this show. It's a pair of safeties that were ended up having to commit, or not having to, but did choose to commit over this past week. The first of which was Noah King out of Fairfield, Ohio, 6 feet, 1.5 inches, 195, like I said, from Ohio, rated as an 89 3-star on 3 and an 87, give or take, overall on the composite rankings. And this one actually kind of took us by surprise, because another K-State target who actually did end up committing, I think it was the next day, and we just decommitted. So we thought that this was actually going to be the next guy that we're talking about. But Noah King also had offers from Kentucky, Nebraska, West Virginia, and Miami of Ohio, to name a few. But Connor, what are your initial thoughts on Noah King? He is listed as an athlete. I imagine he's probably a safety at K-State.
Yeah, he does have a lot of highlights at corner. And for what it's worth, he's listed at 6'1.5", but he does honestly look a little taller than that. And these recruiting services don't always keep up 100% with recruits' heights. Like Lincoln Cure, he's still listed at like 6'4", 215, and he's more like 6'6", 230 at this point.
Yeah.
But no, Noah King, he is a really interesting ad. He's super athletic and is kind of the prototype of what you want really in any defensive back, I think, regardless of position for the most part. He's fairly rangy. He's a good run supporter. He's a little raw, so he has some development to do, but his ceiling is really high. And I think that explains some of the interest from some pretty quality programs. Like outside of those offers that Ace mentioned, Notre Dame and Michigan were both sniffing around at the very least. And I think he might have done an unofficial visit at Michigan at one point as well. So anyone that Michigan's even considering on the defensive side of the ball is pretty high praise, I think, at least. But yeah, I was a bit surprised as well. This was King and not Bartley. And I'm also a little surprised that we were able to get both of them. I kind of figured it was going to be an either or thing with these two guys, but as we've managed to swing for the fences and come up with both of them. So I'm really happy about that in particular.
Yeah. And the number one thing that stuck out with me with Noah King was his fluidity as an athlete, because a lot of his highlights are him playing receiver, which, again, he's listed as an athlete. So he's an Ironman player, but he plays both sides of the ball. But that fluidity really does translate whether he's going to play, free safety, jack safety. I think he's probably a little slight to play strong safety, but I think he might be able to do it. He could play corner theoretically, but for all of his fluidity, he just doesn't have that sort of technique down as of yet. So he is farther along than Zashawn Rich was last year, but that's because Zashawn Rich was a literal ball of clay that had just been harvested, hadn't even been formed yet. Noah King is a little bit further along in his development than that, but also probably has a little bit less in terms of prototypical athleticism and size. But I really like the Noah King pickup, and On3 does well having him as a high 3-star. And yeah, I'm willing to defer to Klanderman on a lot of defensive back picks. And this is one of those where I see what he's seeing, but would sort of be surprised if Noah King does make like an impact year one. But that doesn't limit his ceiling. I kind of see it as a heavily watered down version of what Toby Osensomni was, where Toby had a ceiling that was basically the moon, but a floor that was basically the sixth circle of hell. So it was, the floor wasn't there, ceiling was. I think Noah King is like a higher floor, slightly lower ceiling at the safety position.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair characterization for Noah King. But there's definitely a lot of untapped potential there. I think is maybe the biggest draw with Noah King, and I think you're right. I don't think that he's going to be a significant contributor in year one. I just don't think he'll be refined enough. Now, granted, we have been surprised in the past, particularly with safeties contributing year one, defensive backs in general. So it's entirely subject to change, but I, at least not before I see senior film, I'm uh, not gonna really make a prediction that he's gonna play very much as a true freshman.
Yeah, which I think is fair. So, welcome to the family, Noah. But the other commit for K State was the one that we thought Noah King was, and that is another safety commit. This one from Naples, Florida, in Logan Bartley, a flip from Wake Forest, who also had offers from Ole Miss, Illinois, Boston College, among others. And this pickup is one that I could almost certainly see contributing day one if he had to. Because the thing that sticks out most with Logan Bartley to me is, first off, he has like 4 or 5 highlights of him blocking kicks, which is nuts. But it's just his reaction time that really gets it to me. Like, he is almost always, if he's playing box safety, he's almost always the first guy off the ball when he's like 3 or 4 yards away from the snap. So either he has the insane ability to just guess, or he has that insane twitchy reaction time. And he's also a plus run defender, in part because of that reaction time, but also because he's very good at sort of shifting and altering his momentum as he goes along, and sort of altering his path for like 2 down blocks. In a lot of ways, I could see a world where Logan Bartley, if he puts on like 20 or 30 pounds, I could see him as a pretty solid or a little bit undersized linebacker. But to me, Logan Bartley is like the prototypical strong safety. And I think that he has a legit shot to contribute very, very early in his career just with that skill set alone.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, I think that the consensus, it seems, between these two guys is that King seems to have more upside. I do think that maybe unfairly discounts Bartley a little bit because he definitely right now has significantly better film and is a lot further along in development than Noah King is. I think Bartley, I think you're right. I think he could contribute pretty early, particularly if he ends up enrolling early. I think I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him like not redshirt as a true freshman. But this is one of the more refined defensive back products that K State's brought in, I think. Now the question, of course, is what's his ceiling compared to Noah King? And with a guy like Bartley, it's difficult to judge because of how refined he is technically. Now, how much room for growth is there? It's really tough to say. Now, there's guys you can look at and say, like the sky's the limit with them. But with Bartley, there's no indication really either way that he's either at his ceiling or he has tons of room to grow still. With that being said, though, you kind of alluded to this earlier. Clarendon has really done a fantastic job at evaluating safeties and getting great safeties to come and play K State. So for that reason, I'm pretty optimistic about both of these guys, but I'm also really optimistic about seeing what Logan Bartley can do. So I'm pretty happy about this. And of course, it's always great to get a flip from another Power 4 school. Great to beat an SEC school in Ole Miss that has been recruiting like crazy recently. So this is a really great ad. Both of these guys, I was pretty happy with as additions. They're both in the upper range of the class in terms of their rankings right now.
Yeah. And I understand why, because both of them are really solid pickups in the defensive backfield. I think we're probably done in the defensive backfield unless like they're just unless there's a guy that the staff sees as like basically a can't miss guy. But, with 105 scholarships coming up, which I guess we can before we talk about the game, we can talk a little bit about that news, I guess. With 105 scholarships, I think that in a lot of ways you'll see a lot more in the way of dart throws, which guys, that would have otherwise been walk-ons getting that scholarship opportunity, which upside, it makes roster building, you know, it makes it to where fewer guys are contributing that don't have scholarships. On the other hand, I'm not going to say it's killed walk-ons, but it certainly doesn't help their plight. But I don't know. Before we get into talking about the college football game and just sort of the vibes around that, the news is done after this segment, by the way. So if you're here for the news, enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed the 12-minute episode. But what are your thoughts on the 105 scholarship limit?
Really mixed, I think, because I think that this could really end up going either way in terms of either leveling the playing field or uh, harming parity. I think it's really tough to project which way it'll go, at least from my vantage point. I mean, because I'm looking at this, and on one hand, you can see like the top 5 through 10 schools will just start hoarding talent and just weed out the guys that can't hack it after a year. But on the flip side, you're with the wider rosters, it's also going to allow some talent to matriculate down, and you're going to be able to offer something maybe more enticing to a guy that uh, maybe in the past would have gotten the preferred walk-on offer to Power Four, but then you look at maybe a MAC school that is willing to offer a scholarship, but the Power Four doesn't want to wait to develop him or something like that. But 105 for the full roster, it's an interesting number. I'm not really sure where I stand on it, though. I'm not. Do you have any particular thoughts?
I do have one unrelated thought and then one other football spot. Or two football thoughts. The scholarship increase wasn't just for football; it was across all varsity sports at the collegiate level. So I think basketball. But did basketball pick up one or two more scholarships?
I think 2. I think men's basketball had 13, if I remember correctly, and they're up to 15 now.
Okay, which weird, but fine. Um, and of course, baseball I think picked up like 20. I think they picked up like 10 more scholarships, and now it's up to like 22 and a sixth scholarships or something like that.
No, they picked up a lot more than that. I think, at least from what I could tell, was they. I think they're up to 36 full
Damn.
scholarships now. But I think it also reduced their rosters to 36 as well. So I don't think you can take walk-ons anymore. With baseball, it seems like a lot of this is kind of geared towards getting rid of walk-ons, which I think is an interesting choice. I'm not really sure why the NCAA is set on it. I guess there's maybe some concern there with scholarship athletes and all the perks they're going to get with walk-ons at some point.
And I think it was part of the House settlement too. So I don't know. Which the fact that it's a settlement terrifies me of what the House wanted, because that means this was probably a compromise.
Yeah.
But the two football thoughts that I have are whether or not it's going to be a good or bad thing really depends on each individual recruit. Because if you have a guy who his first thought is to win a national title, yeah, he's probably going to go to like the top 4 or 5 schools. If a guy wants playing time, this honestly may distribute them a little bit better because they will see guys will see, okay, this school is hoarding talent. I'm not going to play early there, so I can go to this other place. I think it'll ultimately balance out to be like basically a net nothing, at least at the FBS level. The or at the FCS level, I think the FCS just took one of the biggest like forehead punches that they possibly could have, because an additional 20 scholarships for 137 6
somewhere around there.
yeah. 100, we'll round up, say 140. 140 times 20, scholarships. Yeah, they just eat it like one of the biggest punches that they possibly could have. So that's the real loser here, is the FCS rankings. I mean, you could, I guess, make the argument that it also hurts the D2 rankings because D2 guys are going to go to FCS. Okay, but yeah, so those are kind of my prevailing thoughts. I mean, I think it'll ultimately balance out, but maybe that's me wanting to be optimistic about it. But the real losers are like FCS pro. This actually, it would not surprise me if this was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of schools that were on the fence or on the bubble of jumping up from FCS to FBS. So it wouldn't surprise me if this move prompted a rise from your North Dakota and South Dakota states of the world.
Yeah, I think that's a good insight. I think that there's maybe some truth to that because, yeah, like there have been some instances of late of guys that will take a scholarship offer at one of those upper tier FCS schools as opposed to a full ride at the FBS level from a MAC school, and then also from walk-on offers at Power Fours even. Now, that doesn't always happen that way, but especially some of those northern schools and the FCS, some of those dominant powers that have been around for a while, they're pretty alluring to a lot of those fringe prospects. But yeah, like if this expansion of rosters allows for FBS schools to go in and dip their toes into recruiting pools that they may have tried to get with a walk-on before, then yeah, that could definitely end up really biting FCS schools.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just the football part of it. For the other sports, I don't feel strongly about the increase in scholarships for all of the other sports except for basketball going to 15, because to me that's like 13 was sort of the perfect number to me, because you get 2 full floors plus 3 additional guys, and now you get 3 full floors of guys, and to me it just seems strange, and I don't really like it that much. But it's not something that I'm willing to like throw a big baby fit over.
Yeah, I don't really think it was necessary, if I'm being honest, at the basketball level. I don't get it really, unless I'm not really sure what the logic is coming out of that settlement for increased scholarships, honestly, unless they're thinking that there's going to be an increased international presence and they're trying to keep scholarships from, or they're trying to make sure that it's not going to like keep homegrown kids like out of basketball. But I don't know why that would be in the House settlement, or at least a concern, unless it was just kind of like the adjacent issue for them. But yeah, that one kind of is weird. Baseball having the option to fully fund scholarships for your whole roster is really interesting. I think I don't remember all the other changes that were made. At least a few of them, I think, probably had to be made just for Title IX reasons, with football going up by so much. But I'm not 100% sure on all of them. But it's definitely something I think has maybe flown under the radar a little bit. it's kind of significant, honestly, but it really has been making waves. Although, granted, the Olympics are going on right now, so there's probably uh, a lot of sports news is probably like very quietly slipping out right around now. So they can try and minimize it.
Yeah. So the new scholarship limits are for baseball it's 34, which was an increase of 22.3, which because they had 11.7
Yeah,
scholarships to give out before.
so strange.
Weird. Yeah. Men's basketball went up to 15, added 2. Women's basketball has always been 15. Um, Golf went up to 9 for both men's and women's. Funnily enough, the previous limit for golf was actually lower for men than it was for women. But then you get scholarships for soccer, which is going up to 28 for both sports. Volleyball is going up to 18 for both sides. So yeah, basically for the sports the K-State cares about, 105 for football, 34 for baseball, 15 for both of the basketball teams, 9 for both golf teams if you care about golf. Track is also another big winner, both going up to 45 each.
That's pretty big, honestly, for track, and that's something that actually we may want to kind of keep our eye on with K-State bringing in a uh, a new head coach or director. They've kind of been using those terms interchangeably, but I mean he's got like 8 athletes at the Olympics like right now, so like that's potentially intriguing. And now you can offer some more full rides for track and field. So just something to keep an eye on, I guess.
Yeah. And this article is saying that it would create an average of 500, no, an average of 790 more scholarships per school.
That is that is a lot of scholarships to fund.
Which win for student athletes. Wow, some schools are probably going to have to cut a few athletic programs.
I will say I'm very happy that we made it through our capital projects before all of this happened, because there's not anything major, I think, left for K State athletics. From what I remember, the press conference with the track coach, they said there may be like a phase 2 to the indoor facility, but phase 1 was like less than $2 million, and that's not for the projects of the scale that K State's been doing. That's not a lot. I think they're going to do something for golf. Tennis might get like an indoor facility, I think, but there's nothing like major left other than I guess like maintenance and like marginal upgrades. Like if this hadn't happened, maybe
the morgue.
Yeah. So it's definitely a good time to be done with most of that stuff, and being able to put a lot of that money that would otherwise been going to capital projects to NIL and to funding all these new scholarships, which you're not required to do, but particularly for a Power Forward program in K-State's position, you probably should, particularly for the major sports. And I mean, like, they may not for soccer. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Yeah. So I just think it's all really interesting. But you want to talk a little bit about the college football game now?
I do want to talk about that.
All right. So the idea that I had that you and I talked about earlier was to give our general thoughts and then things that we kind of want in the game. That we may or may not be expecting them in the game this year, but things that we generally want in the game that are realistic. So no, I'm not going to be adding create a play to my quote unquote list, even though this is mostly just a vibes bit. But I'll let you go first. How are you enjoying the game?
I have been loving it so far. There's obviously some issues with it, but so far I've not encountered anything that has made me want to play less. I've mostly been playing Dynasty. That's probably been like 90% of what I've been doing. And it's all been in one dynasty so far. I've been just doing like a K-State one on All American, and I'm in year 5, I think. Blake Barnett is a redshirt senior right now, so I'm going through the last real class
Yeah.
for K State right now. But I've really liked recruiting. It's kind of brutal sometimes, like because you can kind of get a guy sniped from out of nowhere, and it kind of hurts. Uh, but
Which is real. That happens.
yeah,
It doesn't make it hurt less, but it happens.
yeah. I think that there's maybe an argument that it can be too easy, but I like the general system that they have set up. I think there could be some fine tuning to how the CPU recruits, because I think right now the CPU for other teams is pretty prone to spreading a few points across a lot of players, as opposed to like if there's a 5-star guy, like actually really going after him, which is great for me because that means I get more 5-star recruits. But I also like the first couple of years before I just kind of decided to let it just become like a like pipe dream, like K-State wins the Natty every year dynasty. Like I was like kind of self-limiting a little bit. Like, well, I'm not going to go after any 5-stars because they're not interested in me. I'm going to wait for them to be interested in me. And I still kind of do that, but I'm getting a little bit more loose with it. But on-field gameplay has been excellent. I think obviously there's some broken stuff, like the jet touch passes are kind of broken. I've found that there's a QB jets. There's a jets fake jet sweep QB power play that isn't elite, but it's like a guaranteed like 7 yards that I've run inside the 10 several times, and I'm getting a touchdown or almost a touchdown pretty much every time, particularly if you have a fast QB. I like the new passing system. I don't love the new passing system, but I'm fine with it. And I haven't been trying to do precision passing or anything like from Madden because I haven't played any of those Madden games. So I figured if I'm going to learn a new system, I might as well try the one that they want me to learn, as opposed to one from Madden, which I'm not going to really play Madden. But
Yeah.
I play a little bit of Ultimate Team. I only dabble in the offline stuff, though. I don't particularly care to play this game online because I don't want to get like spin moved like out of this existence. Because the spin
By
move
like
is
some 12-year-old.
yeah, the spin move in this game is pretty broken. Which I do like that they emphasized speed and like the quality of offenses and stuff for college ball a little bit more than they do in Madden games. Sometimes this was a little frustrating to play defense, but I haven't had very many moments where I felt that it wasn't fair at the very least within how the game has set things up. But I'd say overwhelmingly positive for me.
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't say overwhelmingly for me. I really like the game. There are just a few things that kind of like it's mostly small stuff that it just kind of bothers me a little bit, but I really, really like the game. And my experience comes across from I think four dynasties that I have. Yeah, four. Where one is a K State dynasty where I intentionally donkey roll everyone, which is what I call literally the catharsis dynasty. An SMU dynasty where I do play all the games. A Texas State dynasty with realignment where I sim all the games. And then I have the Alleycats dynasty where one of us is a quarterback and the other is a wide receiver. You should be able to pretty easily tell who is who by the heights and also handiness. But also everyone else who's on the Alley Frat House or has been on the Alley Frat House is also people on that team. I will not be revealing what positions they play. But yeah, all of those dynasties have been of the ones that I think are the most fun, other than Catharsis, because that's a different type of fun. I would say I'm probably having the most fun in the Alley Cats dynasty. despite the fact that the first Alleycats game was up against Alabama, and I say we literally are the Alleycats. So I can say we. There is no disputing this. Ended up, I think, taking the lead on a game, take the lead on a touchdown that was called back for a holding play after a jet option at the 1 yard line, and then we proceeded to give up 2 scores in less than 3.5 minutes. That was one of the most painful gaming experiences that I have ever had. that was horrible. That sucked, but it's also realistic. Like, we probably shouldn't have even been in that game to begin with. But I guess my thoughts are, yes, very, very positive, with a few areas that bug me, mostly in recruiting and roster management. And I think that we can sort of start going into our respective wish lists here. And the first one that I'm going to make for like a relatively smaller change, I'm kind of going to want to ramp my list up from small stuff to biggest stuff, is please, for the love of God, give us formation subs back. Like, I get, oh yeah, you can sub in the formations in the each respective formation menu while you're in the game. You don't have time to consistently do that and like remember everybody's ratings as you do that. And I'm someone that really likes playing point guard at quarterback. I really like doing that. And I also like making sure that running backs aren't getting more than like 15 carries or touches a game. Without formation subs, that becomes a whole lot harder. And it's just something that really, it seems like such a ridiculously small thing to like have such a big gripe over, but it does genuinely annoy me that I can't set up formation subs.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I completely agree with that too. I like it's definitely a major quality of life thing to be able to do that in the regular dynasty menu and not when you're in a game, because when you're in a game that's time that you should be like just playing and not having to think about every single game losing like 5 or 10 minutes to getting all your formation subs right. Like, and it doesn't apply to everyone because not everybody does formation subs. But I always have liked doing formation subs because I like to rotate my receivers a lot, and I like to get multiple running backs in the game. So like that's stuff that I like to do. There are admittedly some things that I do like, but they have that kind of bridge that gap, which is having a third down running back and a slot receiver and rush defensive ends or sub linebackers, but it's a little too general for me. I'd still prefer to have the option at least for more control with the formation subs. It doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you, but that's not to say that it doesn't bother me, because it definitely does. But I know that like you're probably like internally like kind of seething about it.
Oh, no. It's external. I'm externally seething about this. But there are 2 other things that I know that you are going to care about significantly less than me, but I'm equally passionate about. But before we get into those, what would you say is like next on your hypothetical list? You don't have to do the ramping up thing. You can start with something big. This is vibes.
Another thing for me, I think, is I just think it's so silly that you can't change numbers of randomly generated recruits. I understand the reasons that you can't with real life players. Like, that doesn't annoy me really at all. Like, I get that. It's an NIL thing, but it does annoy me though that I can't change anybody's number. Particularly with K-State, it annoys me when I see a number 11 because 11 is retired. We can argue about whether that was a good or bad choice to retire 11. But regardless, it is retired and it does bug me. It also really bugs me that my number 1 running back right now is wearing number 81 and I can't do anything about it. So I definitely have some issues that again, it doesn't affect my gameplay at all. Like my running back isn't slower because he wears 81. At least I don't think he is. But it's still something that does bug me in a game that otherwise the customization is really, really deep and really good. It's something that I imagine they were just having issues with because of NIL and not being able to change real life players' numbers, which makes sense. So they're probably just having difficulties differentiating that and like how to make it to where these ones you can, these ones you can't. Uh, I imagine that'll be in the game at some point, but it is just a little frustrating.
Yeah, and I think you and I have talked about the solution for this more generally because I think that player editing is kind of a big spot on everyone's list. And before we get into this, on your note on customization, I was able to make an Alleycats team that I really quite enjoy with blackout uniforms, all lavenders. I worked in a lot of like neon designs. So Connor, I am wondering when you are going to begin your Alleycats dynasty, but.
I understand. It'll be beginning soon, probably whenever I get bored of winning the national title every year with K-State, I guess, which that might be never, now that I'm saying it out loud, but
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
But
I guess we'll see.
yeah. The solution that you and I came up with is for the next round of NIL, probably for the next game, unfortunately, give each respective player an opt-in option with their NIL contract saying you can edit this, 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 and this about the player in the game. Because I imagine you'll get some guys that are perfectly fine with like having their height or weight or something edited like that. And you'll get other guys that only want their ratings edited or something like that. And you'll give some guys that want to give full customization for everything. And I think just having an opt-in system would be really good for that. The only downside that I could really see is you could get guys who decide to opt out, like get messages from really stupid people on Twitter. It's like, hey, why didn't you opt in? But you also have that exact same thing happening with players who didn't opt into the game at all. So,
yeah, unfortunately, unavoidable problem. But I wish it was avoidable. But
yeah, the next thing, which outside, no, this is an even bigger thing, small thing that bugs me even more than formation subs does. And Connor, I am curious, if just get a guess in your head here, if you think you know what it is before I say it, but it's the inability to sort playbooks. This bothers me so much because in NCAA 14, you couldn't sort individual formations. That was annoying, but that was okay because like you had them all listed out. You didn't have to scroll through like 14 menus to get to a formation that you want. You could see them all listed out right in front of you. You can't do that in the new game. And not only can you not do that in the new game, you also can't sort your plays in the order that you wanted them called. Because in NCAA 14, I always had my plays sorted by, you started with your run plays, then you had your options, then your screens, then your quick game, then your play action shots, so on and so forth. I took great joy in doing that. And the main reason why was because it was incredibly convenient and it didn't take that long to set up. In the current game, first off, if you do create a playbook, none of the formations are sorted alphabetically in the playbook creator, which bothers that in and of itself is an affront to God. So, because I think it starts with like Y off flex or something like that. It doesn't even start with like anything in the A's. It starts with Y, but the ability to sort playbooks, as you can tell, very, very much bothers me.
yeah, I can't relate to that at all. It's something that for your sake, I do wish was in the game. But it's something that, for me personally, it doesn't bug me at all. I don't know why. And playbook sorting was just never something that I did in Madden or in college
Oh,
football.
you can't do it in Madden either.
Oh, well,
But at
never
least
mind.
in Madden, the formations in the playbook creator are sorted alphabetically.
Yeah, so that doesn't bother me. I just kind of adjust, I guess. But if I had a particular way I liked doing things, I'd want at least the option to do it in the game. So I understand where you're coming from. I can't relate though.
What's next on your additions to the game? Or
Um,
changes? Addition or changes? Whatever you so desire.
um, I'll say changes. And you and I have talked about this a bit, and it is something that would take a while. But sim logic is definitely a little wonky right now. Now, don't get me wrong. I do appreciate that they want to have the like 2007 like week 6 like AP top 25 like be the college football playoff every single year. Like I think that's fun. I think that's entertaining. Uh, on the other hand, though, like in my perfect world, it's like a slider. You can have like a chaos slider that determines like if you want everything to be like the best team is just going to win like 99.9% of the time, or if you want it to be like just completely and utterly random. Like that would be great, I think, to have a sim logic slider, but I don't think we'll get that. And in the absence of that, I'd prefer be a little bit close to being more realistic because I do think it's a little too easy to get upsets or be upset by another team, and particularly bad with the Sims. And on that note as well, I think uh, that if we're going to talk about fixing some of the logic in the game, some of the polls are pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like I really don't ever want to see like 5 loss teams making it into the playoff, and I've seen that a couple of times already. So I've seen screenshots of winless teams getting into a bowl game, which is
Oh,
admittedly actually kind of funny. But
word.
yeah, it's also something that needs to be fixed. Um, so there's some like fine tuning stuff like that, but also some grander things to help with the realism a little bit. And I get that it's not supposed to be entirely 100% realistic because it's at the end of the day, it's a game. It's supposed to be fun. Uh, but I'm always kind of in the mood for something different. Sometimes I want to play like a game where it feels like it's like pretty close to real. Other times I just want K-State to win by a lot, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree that the sim logic needs a little bit of work. I think is probably the best way to put it. Um, the next small thing for me is just updated positional terminology. I'm not going to get as mad about this one as I was with sorting the playbooks because it's generally pretty difficult to get me that sort of riled up outside of a real sport context. But I I don't like the whole, because let me paint a picture for you here. You're running a 3-3-5 team. You're going after an outside linebacker. Joke's on you. You're not actually going after an outside linebacker. You're going after an edge rusher that the game doesn't know how to differentiate. That happens every year, and every team is recruiting incorrectly because of it. It's no longer defensive tackle, defensive end, outside linebacker, Mike linebacker. It's not like that really anymore. It's much more interior defensive line, edge rusher. You can get 3 techs in there technically, off ball linebacker, safety, and corner. It's something small, but just making that one fix would really help. And this has been going on in Madden for the past decade, and it's why roster construction in Madden has always been so wonky because you have like 4-3 teams that have edge rushers playing off ball linebacker, and it's terrible every time. But oh god, it's just painful memories of doing a Chiefs franchise and having Khalil Mack play for the Colts and drop into coverage every play. That hurt. That like physically hurt. But yeah, that's just one. I'd say that those 3 things are probably like the biggest, relatively small things for me. The other stuff I have would require like pretty significant changes to the game itself. But I'll give you the positional terminology thoughts, and then whatever you want added or changed next.
No, I actually have been thinking about the positional terminology stuff, particularly the last few days. If I am at a point where I miss on a couple recruits and I need to go back to the barrel and look for more, I kind of start to hit a point where it's like, oh, I need an outside linebacker. Oh, this guy's 6'5", 260 pounds. That's not an outside linebacker. At least
No.
that's not my definition. So yeah, I'd love to see that. I think a potentially good solution could be having those simplified position names, but then also having like more specific position names that like you can have on a player card like in MLB The Show where they have a primary position and then secondary positions. So you have your 6'5", 250-pound outside linebacker who's primarily an edge rusher, but can also like play a little traditional defensive end and can play like a little bit of Sam if you need him to in a pinch. So like something like that, I think could be interesting to add to the game. But if I think about anything else, the last thing, and this is not a huge thing, it's just a presentation thing. I do think it's weird that there's some mascots in the game, but not all mascots in the game. Like the mascots that are in the game, yeah,
Free Willy, free him.
The mascots that are in the game look fantastic, like truly great. But it's kind of weird. There's only like 30 or 40 when there's like 140 that are like supposed to be in the game. So that bugs me a little bit. I guess another comment or another presentation thing is the commentary is okay, to put it mildly.
The Herb Street team is bad.
Yeah,
they're awful.
Herb Street sounds about how he does in NCAA 14 to me, and I really like Fowler, but it feels like he doesn't have any of the juice that he has like in
Bro's bored.
He does. It's like I think they probably did was they instructed him to like have a consistent tone, so like different recordings can be spliced together so they sound like natural. But we need a little bit more emotion. I mean, if they got Gus Johnson to do a Madden game, surely we can figure this out for Fowler. Like, I think Reese Davis sounds a little robotic, but his color commentators, I think, both actually sound pretty decent. And then there's a studio guy who I don't really hear that much, actually. So I don't really have much to say about him.
Yeah, Fowler's awful in the game. Honestly, I'll say it. He puts no emotion forth whatsoever. Because you only get Fowler and Herbstreit on the game of the week. This is supposed to be like a really, really big, important thing. And then you get Fowler's like, it's a deep pass to 20-yard pass to the wide receiver. That'll make it a 4-1 ball game. I'm not sure how much longer are we doing this.
Tone is more along the lines of curious or like inquisitory than like excited. I think is maybe the best way to put how he sounds. It's not like it's not like that tone would never like have a place in commentary. Like there's like probably a lot of like points in games where like that tone's fine, but there's not enough variance. I think the major issue, which I get. You're recording a ton of lines for this game. I think they've said that they're going to continue to keep recording lines going into the future, like even throughout this season, to like add stuff for players that haven't had like lines recorded yet. But no, I'm glad that we agree on that. The commentary could definitely be better.
Yeah. And just to sort of rapid fire my last few things, it does bother me that recruits don't gain or lose weight as you go throughout your dynasty. So you have a bunch of like 290-pound nose tackles, which don't get me wrong, those players exist, but they're not as common as like, 'cause if they come in at 290, they're probably going to end their career at like 320 or 340. Like, and that no one just stays stagnant. I do want different difficulty settings for offense and defense because I think offense in a lot of ways can feel too easy and defense feels impossible. And there's never been like a solid middle ground, even in Madden, between all pro and all Madden. What else? What else? What else? I already mentioned positional terminology. Ability to create recruits, but that kind of goes with NIL stuff. Add Willie to the game, free him. Trying to think of the big one. Okay. Remember how I said that I was done like being particularly passionate about it? There is one more thing that immediately comes to mind that genuinely kind of upsets me. The coach level cap is far too low. 50 is not nearly enough. And I get it. Like, don't misunderstand. I understand why it's at 50 because they wanted to have it be no coach is good at everything. This is a video game. At least let me have the option to turn off the coach level cap because leveling up your coach is like a pretty significant portion, probably like 40% of the fun in Dynasty. And once you take that 40% away, don't get me wrong, the coaching boosts that you got along the way are nice, but it's sort of this, well, what now feeling, especially with how expensive some of the later upgrades get. So like an option to either turn it off or to make the coach level cap higher, because like it feels like a lot of it, you're just scratching the surface. And, the no coach is good at everything. A, it's a video game. B, tell me what coach Nick Saban was bad at. Exactly. Exactly. Offensive play calling, but yeah. Do you have any rapid fire bits there or anything that you want to add on to what I said?
One last thing I'll say is I've noticed that in Dynasty, a lot of player ratings, once you get past the first couple of years, they really kind of plateau. Like in the game, like baseline, there's plenty of guys in the mid and high 90s. Now there aren't a lot, which I think is how it should be, but they are present. They are there. And since kind of that point, I've not really had anybody in my dynasty get higher than like a 92 out of the players that I've recruited, which I do appreciate that they don't want it to be, like everyone you recruit becomes 99 overall, like in NCAA 14. But on the flip side, it's just that like the general overall across all players in the game kind of seems to not get a lot better. Maybe that's because of the skill trees that like I'm going with, but some players are going to be good no matter what development trait like your coach has. So I'd like to see that maybe get loosened a little bit more. But I think they have the right intentions, at least, with what they're doing.
Yeah, and I'll sort of piggyback off of that because I've had sort of that same experience and same problem even with XP sliders. Another thing that I kind of take issue with, and it's on the minor end of things. I don't think player performance matters nearly as much in development as it should, because I had Blake Barnett in my dynasty, and he just refused to leave. Like he had 2 years where him and Jordan Allen won the Heisman as a defensive player and still stayed all 5 years in college. Blake Barnett won the Heisman his redshirt junior year, decided to come back to college because his overall wasn't high enough for the game to recognize him as being draftable. Which, by the way, the break point for that is 86 overall. So and neither of them broke that break point despite their accomplishments. And to me, that's a little silly. I don't want it to go the way of Madden, where dev traits can go down, because oh my goodness gracious, that is a horrible. That system is awful. Like the regression sliders, progression is fine, but the dev trait regression in Madden is one of the worst features they've ever put in, right next to their own fatigue system, actually. But yeah, sort of piggybacking off of that, I wish that on the field performance affected progression considerably more than it does right now. But all in all, like what we named are relatively minor things across a really, really good. Notice how none of us, we didn't say anything about gameplay other than you saying like 2 plays were a little bit busted. The gameplay foundation is amazing.
Yeah.
It's just everything else around it kind of needs to be built up. And this is the first game in what is hopefully a long-running series.
It plays really, really well. I think the only argument that you could have right now for like baseline base sliders need some work is pass blocking or pass rush pass rush can get a little
Bonkers.
irritating
Yeah.
as an offensive player, but that's also something that can be adjusted with sliders. But if they want to go for like the 50s are supposed to be like your baseline and like what they want to happen, then like they could do a little bit of tuning there. But no, the base gameplay is really smooth and just really, really works. I don't have many issues, if any, with that.
Yeah. And the one thing I will say on the pass blocking is the game kind of challenges you to learn what different pass protections are. So remind me after we record to send you the Brett Coleman video, which single-handedly cut my sacks into fourths. Pause.
Yeah,
But
I have been using that some for sure. I've been doing a lot of half slides.
Yeah, which is also known as the best pass protection. But I really, really like the game. It's just it has a few, in the grand scheme of things, minor things that bother me way more than they probably should. For the love of God, let us sort the playbook. Please. Please. I'm fiending for the playbook update. But do you have any final notes for just the entire episode?
I'm just really happy it's back, and it's taken a lot of my life over this last month.
Yeah. But with that all being said, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggieVilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at ACEdward00.
I am at Connor Baltazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out both the official supporters link and the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store in our podcast and Twitter bios. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.